The jet fighters didn't reach Long Island until 22 minutes after the second tower had been hit. In the post-mortem, the military and civilian air traffic control both gave inaccurate information about the precise timings of how long they took to respond to the hijackings.
In fact, the US authorities have provided a variety of different timelines. Why didn't the BBC inform the viewer about this revision, or ask the relevant officials about these as yet unexplained contradictions?
You got three stories. You now had three stories about 9/11. The first few days after 9/11, Myers, NORAD, and others were saying, we didn't send up any flights until after the Pentagon was hit. On September 18th, they came out with their timeline. They said, here's when the FAA told us, and here's when we scrambled airplanes, and unfortunately they just couldn't get there in time. Critics have looked at those timelines and said, you still could have made it. You could have stopped Flight 175. You certainly could have stopped Flight 77, assuming it was. So they tell you that what we've been told since September 18th is all false. When September 18th, NORAD's timeline said we got a notification of Flight 175 at 8:43, the 9/11 Commission says, no, that was a mistake. They didn't know about it until the South Tower was hit. And then Flight 77, they said, well, we got notification at 9:24. No notification. We only heard about it 2 minutes ahead of time. Just a complete rewriting of history. And revisionism is fine, but you've got to show why the old story was false and why the new story is more credible. They don't do that. They just say, that was incorrect. That was incorrect.
They found plenty of evidence of confusion and chaos, but no deliberate attempt to mislead the public, and no conspiracy to ground the fighters.
The conspiracy files advanced the incompetence theory, but did not subject it to examination.
A recent official investigation has concluded that this was because of human error in the fog of war.
The report that concluded the US military had not deliberately misled the 9/11 Commission claimed the discrepancies were due to a lack of capabilities and thoroughness. Although the Pentagon was cleared of lying, the BBC did not make it clear that this report, and another dating from May 2005, did not explain why a variety of official witnesses gave misleading testimony to an official inquiry. The BBC did not question this or the legitimacy of the Department of Defense investigating itself. In June 2001, the Department of Defense put out new orders to its top generals governing Air Force response in the event of a suspected hijack. It stated that for all non-immediate intervention, the military had to now get permission directly from the Secretary of Defense. Why didn't the BBC examine whether this shift in power affected the US Air Force response times? On the day of 9/11, US Vice President Dick Cheney was giving orders in the emergency command bunker.
I wanted to focus just a moment on the Presidential Emergency Operating Center. You were there for a good part of the day. I think you were there with the Vice President. And we had that order given, I think it was by the President, that authorized the shooting down of commercial aircraft that were suspected to be controlled by terrorists. Were you there when that order was given?
No, I was not. I was made aware of it during the time that the airplane coming in to the Pentagon. There was a young man who would come in and say to the vice president, the plane is 50 miles out, the plane is 30 miles out. And when it got down to the plane is 10 miles out, the young man also said to the vice president, do the orders still stand? And the vice president turned and whipped his neck around and said, of course the orders still stand. Have you heard anything to the contrary?
When each plane slammed into the tower, it damaged the core structure. Then the ensuing fire weakened the building further. Although steel needs 1,500 degrees Celsius to melt, at 650 degrees it loses half its strength. The load-bearing beams buckled when they were unable to carry the weight above, and the floors progressively caved in.
This theory has not just been refuted by 9/11 researchers, but by scientists from the National Institute of Standards and Technology. Why wasn't the viewer informed about the revisionism that has taken place since the Commission report was published? One of the most crucial pieces of evidence contradicting the official story was not even acknowledged by the BBC's Conspiracy Files programme. Both towers came down in around 10 seconds, almost freefall speed. This fact alone refutes the official story. Think about it. How could there be virtually no resistance from the still attached floors as the debris fell onto them? The BBC did not reveal that the original explanation for the collapse of the towers, known as the pancake effect, was put forward by FEMA and accepted by the 9/11 Commission on the basis of a lie about the construction of the Twin Towers. Not included in the programme are the growing number of physicists, metallurgists and demolition experts who conclude that controlled demolition is the most likely explanation.
Now, the pancake theory requires intact concrete, a lot of mass, hitting the next floor, and then those two hit the next floor, you see? And so you would expect then from that theory, which is the official theory, as the floors pancake, you'd expect to see a whole stack of floors piled up on top of each other after the collapse is completed. Instead of a whole stack of floors, and then a spindle of the core column standing too, what you see is dust that's being produced. Now you can't have it both ways. In other words, if there's dust being produced, where's the mass that causes the collapse? And if there's a mass in the collapse, that every time one floor hits a stationary floor, or a set of floors hits a stationary floor, that'll slow the collapse down. The mass has to move out of the way to get the collapse to be rapid. Well, you have to have half the columns fail about the same time. There's 47 steel, huge, 3 feet at the base, steel columns going up the core. 47, they're interconnected. How do you get them to fail simultaneously so the core disappears?
The temperatures that were seen by the steel samples were not high enough to soften or melt any kind of steel, even unfireproof steel. Well, these floor models didn't fail in the furnaces. They all passed the test for 2 hours. 2 hours, of course, is longer than either of the buildings stood. That was a red flag for me.
This reconstruction first appeared in a programme on PBS for television in the US. Even if the reinforced steel did weaken, it would not fall as portrayed in this graphic, because it was meshed with concrete. In the Nova animation, it takes over 60 seconds for the buildings to collapse, and the central columns are left standing. Why then did the BBC reuse a graphic that does not accurately portray the design of the Twin Towers, or show what happened to them? The BBC relied solely on Davin Coburn, a journalist at Popular Mechanics magazine with limited specialist qualifications.
When the floors began crashing down upon themselves, the air just simply looked for the path of least resistance, and generally that went straight out the windows. And a little bit of debris and smoke went with them, and that sort of represents those puffs that people think were squibs or some other explosive charge.
Why didn't the programme makers question or substantiate Coburn's theories? And more importantly, why were his proposals presented as the more credible, when in reality the evidence has always contradicted his suggestions? The BBC showed masses of melded debris from the Twin Towers, but did not attempt to explain what could cause this kind of damage. Why didn't the BBC tell the viewer that the vast majority of the steel from Ground Zero was quickly processed and shipped abroad without forensic analysis? This amounts to unauthorised removal of evidence, a criminal offence, yet nobody has ever been arrested in connection with it. Steel recovered from Ground Zero has tested positive for sulphur, a byproduct of thermate, an explosive used in controlled demolition.
By analyzing this, we determined it is not molten aluminum from the plane. Okay, indeed, it contains a great deal of iron, which is the product of the thermite reaction. It's not just structural steel that somehow melted. No, it's very little chromium, but it does have sulfur and manganese and some other elements that are characteristic. You see, it's like a fingerprint that the criminal left behind. This carries with it evidence. How was this done? What was used?
If masonry, heavy enough to damage Building 7, was propelled from the Twin Towers, where did the energy come from to do this? Why didn't the programme makers ask this question? How was reinforced concrete pulverised? Where did the energy come from to propel it across New York? Why didn't the BBC report that thousands of New Yorkers have either died or fallen chronically ill after inhaling toxins born on the dust cloud?